discover how best you should trade on a day like today. And of course, later on the show, we'll also bring you a Make in India success story in the making. Zoho's Sridhar Vembu has announced that Arattai is the most downloaded app on Play Store. We'll bring you all this and more on this edition of Morning Brief at 9. This is Morning Brief at 9. First up, let's bring you all the headlines that you're tracking for you this Monday morning. All eyes on RBI Monetary Policy Committee meet as October policy may bring another 25 basis point repo rate cut amid Trump's tariffs as well as easing inflation. New US Gold Card program sees surge in interest from wealthy Indians after the H-1B visa fee hike, offering $1 million pathway to US residency and attracting mid-career STEM professionals. US names India among big ones as US Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick urges New Delhi to open markets and change approach amid steep tariffs and resumed trade talks. Russia affirms strong strategic partnership with India, says bilateral ties stand on their own merit despite US pressure. Russian Foreign Minister Sergey Lavrov praises Prime Minister Modi's foreign policy and confirms Putin's visit in December. UK government announces up to £1.5 billion loan guarantee for Jaguar Land Rover to support supply chain, protect jobs and aid recovery after major cyber attack. The government issues operational guidelines for public EV charging stations under the 10,900 crore rupee PM e-Drive scheme with subsidies up to 100%. BHEL to implement National Unified Hub and mobile app integration. India's homegrown messaging app Arattai climbs to #1 on App Store, surpassing WhatsApp, driven by government endorsements, downloads and a promise of a spyware-free Made in India chat as well as email platforms to follow. Apple expands supply chains in India to nearly 45 companies for local component manufacturing, creating 350,000 jobs, including 120,000 direct positions. Accenture lays off over 11,000 employees globally amid AI adoption and slowing demand as part of an $865 million restructuring program while investing in upskilling staff in agentic AI. All eyes are now on the Reserve Bank of India as its Monetary Policy Committee meets from today to October 1st after 3 consecutive rate cuts earlier this year totaling 100 basis points or 1 full percentage. The RBI hit pause in the month of August. But Nomura now expects a 25 basis point cut in the upcoming policy. Now, the October meeting is crucial as it comes right after US President Donald Trump's additional 25% tariff on Indian shipments and the rollout of GST 2.0 rates amid the boosting consumption. Now, SBI Research has also pitched for a rate cut, calling it the best possible option, though some experts still see a status quo to be maintained. RBI Governor Sanjay Malhotra will announce the MPC's decision on October 1st, with markets closely watching for cues on growth, inflation, as well as the impact of global challenges. Teresa John, the Deputy Head of Research, as well as the lead economist at Nirmal Bang, joins me this morning. Teresa, good morning. Thank you so much for your time this Monday morning. Help us understand, it's not just other agencies, even Nirmal Bang is expecting a 25 basis point cut on October 1st. Why so?
Oh, yes.
All right, there seems to be some connection problem there with Teresa John from Nirmal Bang, who will join us shortly. But here is what we know from Nirmal Bang's expectations. Nirmal Bang is expecting a 25 basis point rate cut on October 1st. And this comes primarily on account of downward revisions in CPI inflation print. Now, there's also likely to be the tariff impact, which should be weighing in on Governor Sanjay Malhotra's mind, while some reports, including the one by Nirmal Bang, suggesting that the tariff impact, which is highly negative on the Indian economy, may partly be offset by the GST rate cuts that we witnessed commencing on the 22nd of September. But the challenge of external headwinds continues to pose downward risk to growth. Meanwhile, the long-term inflation is expected in the range of 4 to 4.5%. Remember, in quarter one of this financial year, which is the April, May and June period, India witnessed growth of 7.8% on GDP. So while growth pressure could be challenged by external headwinds, including those on account of tariffs, there is a chance that lower inflation, targeted perhaps now at about 2.5% or so, given the healthy monsoon situation, may prompt the Reserve Bank of India to go ahead with another rate cut of about 25 basis points. Let's see if we have Teresa John, lead economist of Nirmal Bang, here with us. We are setting her frame and hopefully she should be here with us in just a little bit. But on your screens right now, you've seen the expectations which are coming from multiple agencies, including Nirmal Bang, that October 1st, just 2 days from now, we could see another 25 basis point rate cut. Now, inflation has been under control and growth projections have been fairly robust in the last quarter. And Q2 may have seen a little bit of a shock on account of tariffs, but Q3 is when the real growth is expected on account of the GST cut. We've seen the auto sector regain demand on auto sales, car sales like never before, and also other consumer durables like air conditioners, refrigerators, as well as televisions are seeing a healthy demand. So Q3 could pretty much be in line with Q1. But from there, how is the journey going to pan out? Let's discuss that now with Teresa John. Teresa, a 25 basis point rate cut expected on October 1st. What are you picking up? Why do you think the RBI will go ahead and cut rate again?
Yeah, so we are expecting a 25 basis point rate cut, mainly because inflation is likely to be revised down. So we think the RBI started with the 4.2 forecast in February, and now we're at 3.1%. That could get a further downward revision in this monetary policy on October 1st. So that is why we're expecting a rate cut. In addition, the GST rate cuts are also disinflationary. So according to our estimate, there could be a 60 basis point downward revision to the, because of the GST rate cuts, there could be 60 basis point disinflationary impact because of that as well. So overall, all of that put together, plus rate cuts from the US Fed, mean that you could actually see a rate cut from the RBI on October 1st.
Teresa, your outlook also suggests that the tariff impact, which is largely negative for the Indian economy, may be partly offset by the GST cut. Now, we've seen Q1, healthy growth in Q1, as healthy as 7.8% growth. Q2, we don't know what those numbers are going to state, but Q3, again, with the GST cut, is likely to be a robust quarter for India's growth. At a time like this, is there need for RBI to push for more growth, more capex investment by the private sector by cutting interest rates?
So the tariff will have a negative impact on inflation by around 45 to 50 basis points for FY26. The GST rate cut will only partially offset that. So I think there is a need to support growth, crucially at a time when global central banks are also doing the same. So from that perspective, I agree with you that the first quarter numbers have broadly held up, but that is also because of lower inflation. Your GDP numbers are looking high. If you look at nominal GDP growth, that itself is under pressure. It was at 8.8% in 1Q, which is far from optimal.
All right. And external headwinds, are tariffs the only external headwinds that one should factor in right now? Or is there something else with respect to potential hike in gold prices that we've seen, potential pressure coming up on oil prices in case the Russian oil purchases by India were to come under some sort of a negotiation and India would potentially cut, if at all that scenario arises, then are tariffs the only external headwinds that one should factor in right now, or could there be more?
To start with, on gold prices, because of the global uncertainty, gold prices have been moving up. Unlikely to come down unless the global uncertainty settles, and no one is expecting that in the near future. So there could be some upward pressure from gold prices, but I think the RBI will largely look through that. If you look at core inflation, which is excluding the impact of gold and silver, it is actually at around 3.1%, very benign. On oil prices, even if India does stop Russian oil purchases, I don't think oil prices are going to go up very significantly. Largely, oil prices are holding up because of the supply cuts. Global demand is not that good. So I don't think there is any significant pressure that you will see on oil prices. It's largely likely to remain range bound.
All right, so no external shocks as far as oil prices go. Tersa John, thank you so much for your time this morning and for joining us here on News 9 to put the RBI Monetary Policy Committee and the expectations from it here in perspective. So remember, October 1st is when we will hear from RBI Governor Sanjay Malhotra, and potentially a 25 basis point rate cut could be expected. But will he go ahead and bite the bullet? We will get to know only on October 1st, where we will bring you that story and more. Well, moving on for now, as the United States is turning up the heat on India over trade, Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick has named India among what he calls the big ones. Now, Washington wants to resolve trade disputes with alongside Brazil and Switzerland. Now, in a recent interview, Lutnick urged India to change its approach if it wants better market access in the United States. He said US President Donald Trump's approach to deals is clear, while highlighting that the first deal is always the best deal, warning that future deals will only get tougher. Now, India currently faces some of the steepest US trade levies, including a 50% tariff on key goods. Now, this includes a 25% penalty for continuing to buy Russian oil. Now, this comes as India and the United States have resumed trade negotiations. Now, Commerce Minister Piyush Goyal recently led a delegation to Washington, meeting US trade officials to discuss the framework for a possible agreement. Russia has reaffirmed its strong ties with India, stressing that New Delhi's relations with Washington or any other country will not set the benchmark for India-Russia relations. Russian Foreign Minister Sergey Lavrov, speaking on the sidelines of the 78th UN General Assembly, called the partnership particularly privileged and strategic, standing on its own merit. Now, Lavrov made it clear that bilateral ties remain unaffected by external pressures, including the US objections to India's ongoing purchase of Russian oil. He praised Prime Minister Narendra Modi's foreign policy, saying Russia fully respects India's national interests and the approach New Delhi is taking to safeguard them. Now, highlighting ongoing high-level engagement, Lavrov highlighted the recent Modi-Putin meet at the SCO summit in Shanghai and confirmed that President Vladimir Putin is expected to visit India in December, further strengthening the strategic partnership between India and Russia. Let's listen in to what Lavrov said.
This year, my colleague, I spoke to him yesterday, Subrahmanya Jaishankar, well, he will visit Russia, I will visit India. We hold regular exchanges. And I heard, I'm not even asking what is going to happen to our trade relations, our oil. I don't ask our Indian colleagues this. They are perfectly capable of making these decisions for themselves. And publicly, my friend who I referenced earlier, when he was asked a similar question, said, if the U.S. wants to sell their oil to us, we are prepared to discuss the terms for this. But what we buy from other countries, not the United States, but from Russia or other countries, that's our own business. And that has nothing to do with the Indian-U.S. agenda. And I believe that that is a very worthy response that shows that India, like Turkey, has self-respect.
And moving on now, the UK government has stepped in to support British car maker owned by Tata Motors, Jaguar Land Rover, announcing a loan guarantee of up to £1.5 billion. Now, the move comes after a devastating cyber attack forced production shutdowns earlier this month, impacting not just JLR but thousands of small and medium enterprises across its supply chain. The loan will come from a commercial bank and will be backed by the Department of Business and Trade's Export Development Guarantee to be repaid over a 5-year period. The aim of it is to strengthen JLR's cash reserves and protect jobs while ensuring suppliers can continue operations. JLR has confirmed a phased restart of operations with parts of its digital estate back online and the Global Parts Logistics Center returning to full operations. The company is working with cybersecurity specialists, the National Cybersecurity Center and law enforcement to ensure a safe and secure recovery. And staying with the auto sector, but here domestically, the Ministry of Heavy Industries has released detailed operational guidelines for the rollout of public charging stations under the 10,900 crore rupee PM E-Drive scheme, marking a major push to accelerate India's transition to electric mobility. Now, under the scheme, 2,000 crore rupees has been earmarked for the development of EV charging infrastructure across cities as well as highways. Certain categories, including government offices, hospitals, educational institutions, as well as CPSE premises, are eligible for full subsidies, covering up to 100% of costs. Now, key public locations such as airports, railway stations, metro stations, bus depots, as well as state-run fuel outlets will receive 80% support for EV infrastructure and 70% for charging equipment, while malls, markets, and private sites can claim 80% subsidy on infrastructure. Battery swapping and charging stations are also included under the subsidy framework. The government plans to prioritize development in cities with a population of over 1 million, that's 10 lakh residents, state capitals, smart cities, as well as the National Clean Air Program cities. Meanwhile, the high-traffic highways connecting industrial hubs and ports will also be a key focus. And a story that came over the weekend, India's very own messaging app, Arattai, has just surged to the top of the App Store charts, surpassing WhatsApp in the social networking category. Zoho, owned by Sridhar Vembu, this took to social media platforms to announce the news, saying we are officially #1 in social networking on the App Store. Now, the rise comes after a week of growing buzz driven by government endorsements as well as memes. Now, remember, launched in 2021, Arattai, which means chat or chit-chat in Tamil, began as a modest side project by Zoho. Now, the app's sudden popularity spike is also linked to fresh visibility from government circles. Union Education Minister Dharmendra Pradhan recently encouraged Indians to switch to local digital platforms, citing Arattai as a top recommendation. Remember, one of the key features of Zoho's Arattai is its low bandwidth optimization. It is optimized to work even in areas where the internet connection is weak or intermittent. The app has soared to both iOS and Android, momentarily overtaking WhatsApp as well as Telegram. And time for a very short break, but when we come back, we'll look at the stock markets, which have just opened, and it seems to be a flattish start, although looking much better on the charts than what we saw on Friday, where Sensex and Nifty lost close to 1%. Mohit Gang will be here to break up all that you should expect as far as your market outlook and your investment horizon is concerned. You're watching Morning Brief at 9.
व्यू मस्त है और चाय भी बुरी नहीं है।
नए घर में चाय के मजे कहाँ लोगे? ये खूबसूरत चिंता आप करिए। होम लोन की चिंता हम संभाल लेंगे विद अट्रैक्टिव इंटरेस्ट रेट्स एंड इंस्टेंट सैंक्शन।
टीवी 9 फेस्टिवल ऑफ इंडिया 2025 दिल्ली में मचने वाला है धमाल। दिल वालों की दिल्ली तैयार हो जाओ। इस नवरात्र 28 सितंबर से 2 अक्टूबर तक इंडिया गेट के पास मेजर ध्यानचंद राष्ट्रीय स्टेडियम में TV9 फेस्टिवल ऑफ इंडिया 2025 ला रहा है मस्ती, म्यूजिक और मजेदार खाने का तड़का। डांडिया नाइट में थिरकने का मौका, बड़े बड़े सितारों की धमाकेदार परफॉर्मेंस और नवरात्रि, दुर्गा पूजा, दशहरा का रंग बिरंगा जश्न। चटपटे फूड स्टॉल से पेट भरिए और लाइफस्टाइल एक्सपो में फ्री एंट्री के साथ शॉपिंग का मजा लीजिए। दोस्तों, फैमिली या फिर पार्टनर के साथ आओ और फेस्टिवल सीजन को बनाओ यादगार। सुबह 10 बजे से शुरू होने वाली इस पार्टी का टिकट पकड़ो बुक माई शो से और हो जाओ तैयार दिल्ली के सबसे बड़े उत्सव के लिए। TV9 फेस्टिवल ऑफ इंडिया, जहां पर हर बीट पर है मस्ती और हर पल में है जश्न।
Presented by Hero MotoCorp. Special partner Lyra Women's Wear. Leggings वो जो लायरा हो।
Philips, सोने पे सुहागा।
Polo Elevators, स्मार्ट भारत की स्मार्ट लिफ्ट।
Java 42, the answer.
नई गाड़ी लेनी पड़ेगी।
हाँ, हमें भी।
शोरूम खोला जल्दी।
संभल कर, अंदर महंगा इंश्योरेंस बेचने की पूरी कोशिश हो सकती है। जबरदस्ती
कौन करेगा जबरदस्ती? फोड़ दूंगा इधर।
रिलैक्स कमला कर, कोई जबरदस्ती नहीं है। नई गाड़ी के लिए हम एको कार इंश्योरेंस ही लेंगे।
फेयर प्राइस, कम प्रीमियम।
बात खत्म।
बात खत्म।
सर बात खत्म। अरे सर बात खत्म। अरे सर,
कार का एक्शन हीरो एको।
Welcome back. You're watching Morning Brief at 9 right here on News 9. Let's bring you all the action from the Lal Street. And honestly, not much action. It's been a fairly flat opening this Monday morning. Stock markets are pretty much flat, although just slightly in the green, but on second decimal points. Sensex and Nifty 50 holding pretty much the same levels that we saw them close at on Friday after the 100% tariff on pharma announcement sent stocks, especially in the pharma and healthcare sector, reeling under pain. Not much recovery, although we are seeing some green shoots this morning. But as things stand right now, in the first 10 minutes or so of trading, Sensex at just about 80,460 odd levels. Nifty 50 below the 25,000 mark at about 24,675. Meanwhile, the small cap and the mid cap space is slightly better. In fact, mid cap just partly better. Small cap also more or less flat this Monday morning. Let's pull up the Nifty 50 heat map and try and see where are we seeing some potential action this morning. Well, the auto sector seems fairly mixed because on one hand, you're seeing Maruti Suzuki down about 0.8% or so, but Mahindra and Mahindra are rising about 1.16%. Meanwhile, Tata Motors also up in the green this morning, close to about 1% or so. The healthcare sector, the pharma sector, which was hit by tariffs on Friday, well, that sector is seeing a little bit of recovery as things stand right now. Cipla as well as Dr. Reddy's from the Nifty 50 pack are marginally in the green this morning. Sun Pharma more or less flat, not much change after the stocks had seen a massive tanking on Friday after announcement of the tariffs. Meanwhile, Reliance Industries is up about 0.5%. Energy stocks more or less doing well. ONGC as well as Coal India in the green this morning. The IT sector, mixed cues again. HCL Tech is reeling under some pressure, down about 1/5 of a percentage point. Meanwhile, Wipro, Infosys, TCS and Tech Mahindra doing slightly better. What should be the outlook for this coming week as we begin our investing journey this Monday morning? Remember, there's going to be a short week with 2nd October being a holiday on account of Gandhi Jayanti. And also the big headline event on the 1st of October, the RBI Monetary Policy Committee meets. So Mohit Gang is here to unpack what to expect in market action this week. Mohit, good morning. Thank you so much for being here with us on News 9. First up, charts not looking impressive at all this morning. It's a flat open. One was expecting that perhaps there could be some recovery, at least some value buying in stocks, but that seems to be absent in sentiment this morning. What is holding investors back?
Hi Karthik, morning, always a pleasure to be on your show. Look, honestly, I don't think so the mood of the market is right now in a in any sort of a bullish phase. I'll be very surprised if we hold on to the morning positive tick also. I think last 6 days we have seen consecutive selling in the market, and there is a lot which is happening, Karthik, on the macro side. Look, I think the US-India trade relationship, to my mind, I think continues to go one way south. Honestly, the commentary which is coming from top officials in the US government is not very encouraging. I think yesterday or day before yesterday, we saw some comments coming from the Commerce Secretary out there, and that doesn't augur well for a long-term fruitful relationship. And every day, if you see, every second day, there is some announcement of tariffs around pharma, around electronics, around something, H-1B visa. So there is an all-round pressure on India to kind of cave in, and my sense is this might just go down the slope, and I think that's what market is fearing right now. I don't think so anything else can trigger the market right now but a positive news coming on the US-India trade side. And the second part is, Karthik, even the valuation story is not supporting India right now. Honestly, I think even though we have time corrected for almost a good year, the valuation in the mid-cap, small-cap space still remains frothy at many levels. And I think if we don't see substantial earnings growth, then perhaps we are in for a long wait. I'll not say a long correction, but a long wait for sure.
Let's take this one by one. There's a lot of points that you've touched upon, Mohit. Let's begin first with you believing that the India-US story is only going further south. Now, of course, the tariffs on pharma sector were expected because these were exempt, at least initially, when the 25% tariff on India was slapped. But Donald Trump had also gone on record to say that pharma tariffs could be the highest one has ever seen, could go over a period of time to as high as 250%. Now, 100% tariff compared to 250% still seems fairly okay. And also the fact that tariffs are likely to be to hit the patented drugs category more than the generic drugs in which India operates. So why the fear specifically on earnings of pharma stocks right now?
Karthik, I think a couple of things out here. The valuations in the pharma space have not been kind. To be very honest, I think the valuations have been at a pretty high level for a while now. And the second part, which is the US-India story, honestly, I think, it looks more like a story now which is coming out to corner India somehow and to force India to kind of agree to the terms of US. And if that means that for a temporary while US might have to hit sectors which India is good in, that could also come through, right? And I think that's the fear in the market. It's not about whether India is good at generics or whether India is not good at generics. I think it's all about now targeted action being taken from the US government against sectors which are perhaps our core strength areas, right? So that's the whole issue right now.
Okay. And can it go any worse than this? I mean, leave aside the pharma sector for now. You said that the story is going further south, but 50% is pretty much as high as one can expect it to ever go. If anything, if things were to change, they're likely to change only for the better. Why do you think they will continue to become worse from here?
Look, I think on the headline front, I think it might just continue to become worse if things are not salvaged immediately. And there is no sign of salvation right now. There is no indication coming from the Indian government or from the US government that the talks are headed positively, or there is any sign of any party giving in or ceding in few inches, right? So if this continues for a long while, then I'm fearing further action coming India's way. So that's part number one. Part number two, I'm not fearing a huge value correction out here. Honestly, that's not happened for last 1 year by virtue of the domestic strength which we have, by virtue of the domestic macros, domestic buying. So all that is good, supportive indicator that Indian markets might still continue to stand. But in terms of time correction, perhaps this might just last a little longer than what we have anticipated initially. Having said which, Karthik, here's my disclaimer that we are one news or one headline away from just turning away, right? So if there is any positive development or any positive headline which comes through our way, then perhaps the markets might just soar and it'll be then very difficult to catch the market. So it's a conundrum. You can't be out of this market, but you can't perhaps be all in as well.
All right, and one potential positive news, not externally but domestically, might come on the 1st of October by way of RBI's Monetary Policy Rate Setting Committee meet, which could potentially cut interest rates by about 25 basis points. But what we are seeing, at least on a Monday morning on the charts, Mohit, is that the defensive stocks, the FMCG sector, is reeling under God knows what pressure, because the inflation expectation is expected to be modest. You also have high growth expectations on account of cut in GST. But we are seeing stocks of Hindustan Unilever down about 2.5%. Similar story coming from Nestle India and Britannia, which are down about 1% or so. Why are the defensive stocks being so defensive at a time when there is potential good news around the corner for them?
Yeah, I think, Karthik, it's a very topsy-turvy kind of a scenario. The defense stocks are getting aggressive and the defensive stocks are getting more defensive, right? So that's the whole thing. But I think it's more to do with the commentary which has come out from HUL. I think the commentary was that they will perhaps turn around only flat kind of results or very, very minimalistic single low-digit growth, and which is what market is not liking. But I think they've kind of clarified in the commentary that it is the GST impact will take a little while and perhaps maybe a quarter more to come through in the financial results. But I think market is not very happy. I think market was expecting huge bumper results this quarter itself. But I think to be fair, my sense is the consumption story is still a quarter away to reflect in the results. It will start reflecting on the ground perhaps this festive season, and the opening signs of which are already evident. But my sense is in terms of the results, in terms of the numbers and the bottom lines of the companies, perhaps it might reflect a quarter late.
And the other side of the coin happens to be the consumer durables, especially the auto sector. We saw news reports of Tata Motors booking some 10,000 vehicles on the very first day of Navratri, Maruti Suzuki booking some 30,000 vehicles or so. But some mixed cues in the auto sector this morning. For some reason, Maruti Suzuki is under pressure. The stock is down, but we are seeing positive action on the other top three auto companies, including Mahindra, Tata Motors, as well as Hyundai. So some sort of jitters around Maruti Suzuki this morning. Are you picking up something, Mohit?
Not exactly, Karthik. I'm not sure, or maybe I've missed a beat out here in terms of why the market is, why the stock could have opened negative out here. Look, I think overall on the auto pack, on the consumer discretionary durable FMCG auto, I think these are few sectors which I think will remain the supporting sectors in the market for at least a year more. I think the GST impact is massive, and it will start reflecting gradually and slowly, and perhaps we have already seen those signs in the overall auto segment where the booking numbers have been massive. Look, I think one thing could have been that perhaps market was anticipating much higher numbers from Maruti to come through, but it has not come from Maruti but from the other players, perhaps from Hyundai, from Anmin and Tata Motors, and maybe that could be one of the reasons. But again, as I said, I'm not very looking at a day-to-day movement out here. Perhaps from a year kind of a story, I think I still remain bullish on the overall pack.
All right, so bullish on the auto sector is a word coming in from Mohit Gang. Meanwhile, markets have inched up significantly ever since they opened about 15 minutes ago or so. In the last 15 minutes, Mohit, tables seem to have turned at least slightly. Nifty 50 and Sensex are both up about 0.2%. Sensex is up almost 180 odd points right now as we speak. But looking at the charts as well, I think there is definitely a little more favorable skew in favor of green as opposed to red. So overall, this week, again, with the MPC, with the potential of a rate cut, are we likely to see some buying action, at least at these slightly discounted valuations between today and tomorrow, Mohit? Or do you continue to remain pessimistic about the outlook and you think that the external pressures are going to weigh negatively on the market?
Look, there's no two ways that with 6 days of consecutive selling, the markets were looking very attractive. They are looking very attractive, and that's perhaps the biggest reason why you see a green tick today morning. Honestly, I think because technically it's become oversold, it's in the oversold zone, and perhaps there's some kind of buying. But will there be a sustained buying? Will we not see selling pressure in the second half or perhaps tomorrow? That's for everyone to see. Honestly, structurally, I don't think so anything changes in the market. Perhaps a bounce back here and there where a debt can bounce or something like that. But yes, I think the MPC meeting also, Karthik, 25 bips rate cut, market is kind of sensing it. I'm not saying it's completely factored in. RBI has some headroom given the inflation trajectory and everything, and perhaps looking at the trade relations which are soaring with US, maybe the MPC goes a little aggressive and gives us that 25 bips of bonanza, and I think that'll be good. I think that'll be good for the market, but will that give you a sustained rally? I really doubt that.
All right. Well, no signs of an upcoming rally, at least that's the view coming in from Mohit Gang. Meanwhile, a look at the Nifty 50 Pharma pack also suggests that there are some green shoots, at least as far as value buying after Friday's correction is seen. Sun Pharma is now up almost 0.8% or so. Cipla and Dr. Reddy's are also in the green this morning. So again, Mohit, I think, which way the markets are going to turn right now would be difficult for anybody to sort of anticipate. But for a retail investor, following the SIP route, following the mutual funds route, entering festive season with gold at record high, well, what should be the strategy for the retail investor? Just sit back, wait for some sort of a positive action, because it's been more than a year since we saw Sensex and Nifty reach their peak as far as the index were concerned. But the last 1 year has pretty much been a watershed as far as investments go. So what should the retail investor strategy at this moment be?
Look, Karthik, I continue to maintain that the cost of being out of this market can be much higher than cost of being in the market and facing a mild correction. My sense is, from a retail investor perspective, one has to continue to build the allocations. One has to trust the process out here. As I said, it's a matter of a headline. Whether that headline comes this quarter, next financial year, no one knows, and you can't guess that out, right? So you have to be ready whenever it comes. You have to be in the market, well positioned with your allocations, so that once the rally comes in, you can make the most of it. Markets have time corrected for a year. Perhaps we again time correct for 6 months, maybe in worst case scenario, a year more, right? And that's the time when you accumulate a good corpus, and then the market starts looking extremely cheap on valuations, and that's a typical market cycle. And if you miss that mark, then you miss that mark. Then you can never catch that ride again. So from an investor's perspective, continue allocations, continue through SIP route. Don't go lump sum. Don't go all in right now at this level, but keep your allocation staggered and keep putting into sectors and strategies which you like the most.
Right, Mohit Gang, thank you so much for those inputs. Stay invested, follow the SIP route, avoid the lump sums, and of course it's better to be in the market at this moment than being out of it. Mohit Gang, excellent words of wisdom coming this morning, and thank you for sharing that experience here with our viewers. And before we slip into another break, let's look at the global stories that we're tracking for you this Monday morning. US President Donald Trump teases something special in West Asia talks ahead of meeting with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, fueling speculation about a fresh diplomatic move. Authorities in US state of Oregon filed suit against President Trump's order to send troops to Portland, accusing White House of overreach of powers in a deepening standoff over security. A gunman kills at least 4 people inside a church in US state of Michigan. Trump calls it horrendous and a targeted attack on American Christians. US inflation rises yet again in the month of August while consumer spending beats forecasts, leaving the Federal Reserve with tougher choices on interest rates. Russia launches hundreds of missiles and drones at Kyiv and beyond, killing 4 and injuring dozens in one of the heaviest strikes since 2022. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky says Moscow will pay for its aggression, urging the US to push Russia towards ending the war after Sunday's massive strikes. Widespread UN sanctions on Iran snag back into force for the first time in a decade as nuclear talks with Western powers collapse without a breakthrough. Australian telecom giant Optus suffers major outage, disrupting emergency calls just a week after another blackout was linked to 4 deaths. Vietnam moves nearly 30,000 people from coastal areas as Typhoon Bualoi slams into its industrial heartland, disrupting steel production and threatening major damage. We'll get you these stories after the break. You're watching Morning Brief at 9.
भाई ऑन रोड या ऑफ रोड?
रोड ट्रिप पे किस बाइक की सवारी होगी, ये खूबसूरत चिंता आप करिए। टू व्हीलर लोन की चिंता हम संभाल लेंगे विद स्पॉट अप्रूवल एंड लोन अप टू 95%।
Dreaming about me.
Love is to get lost in the look. Unlimited Love B6 Pack 2 starts at 21.9 lakh.
ये बेस्ट है सर।
हमेशा वाला क्यों नहीं?
मिश्रा जी, आपके लिए फूलों की बरसात। बिरला ओपस एश्योरेंस देने के लिए।
मतलब प्रोडक्ट वारंटी?
ये एक्स्ट्रा है। 1 साल में पेंट को कुछ भी हुआ तो पेंटिंग वापस करके देंगे।
वापस करके देंगे?
वो भी फ्री। पेंटिंग में पहली बार बिरला ओपस एश्योरेंस। रजिस्टर करो birlaopus.com पर।
TV9 फेस्टिवल ऑफ इंडिया 2025 दिल्ली में मचेगी धूम। इस नवरात्र दिल्ली के दिल इंडिया गेट पर स्थित मेजर ध्यानचंद राष्ट्रीय स्टेडियम में आइए और डूब जाइए उत्सव के रंगों में। 28 सितंबर से 2 अक्टूबर तक TV9 फेस्टिवल ऑफ इंडिया 2025 ला रहा है म्यूजिक, डांस, स्वादिष्ट फूड, शॉपिंग का अनोखा संगम। डांडिया नाइट्स में थिरकिए, बड़े बड़े कलाकारों की शानदार परफॉर्मेंस का लुत्फ उठाइए और नवरात्रि, दुर्गा पूजा और दशहरा के रंगों में खो जाइए। लाजवाब व्यंजनों का स्वाद लें और लाइफस्टाइल एक्सपो में फ्री एंट्री के साथ शॉपिंग का मजा लें। तो सुबह 10 बजे से शुरू होने वाले इस फेस्टिवल में अपने दोस्तों, अपने परिवार, अपने पार्टनर के साथ बनाइए यादगार पल। टिकट बुक करें बुक माई शो पर और तैयार हो जाइए एक अनोखे उत्सव के लिए। TV9 फेस्टिवल ऑफ इंडिया 2025, जहां हर पल है जश्न, हर पल है उत्सव।
Presented by Hero Motocorp. Special partner Lyra Women's Wear. Leggings वो जो लायरा हो। Philips, सोने पे सुहागा। Polo Elevators, स्मार्ट भारत की स्मार्ट लिफ्ट।
Welcome back. You're watching News 9. This is Morning Brief at 9. On to stories now from around the world. US President Donald Trump on Sunday hinted at a breakthrough in the West Asia crisis, saying, and I quote, "All are on board for something special," unquote. Now, he said this on the eve of Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's visit to the White House. Now, Netanyahu's scheduled meeting with Donald Trump at the White House on Monday comes days after the US president unveiled a 21-point plan aimed at ending the war in the Palestinian territory during discussions with Arab as well as Muslim leaders on the sidelines of the UN General Assembly. Now, this meeting comes as international isolation of Israel deepens, with countries including Britain, France, Canada and Australia officially recognizing Palestinian statehood, breaking away with long-standing US-led diplomatic protocols. Now, Trump's special plan for West Asia reportedly envisions a permanent ceasefire, the release of hostages, an Israeli withdrawal from Gaza and a major influx of humanitarian aid. Now remember, just last week, while addressing the United Nations, Netanyahu vowed to block a Palestinian state. He also reiterated his government's commitment to finish the job against Hamas. Now, authorities in the United States, the state of Oregon on Sunday sued to halt the deployment of US troops on the northwestern city of Portland a day after President Donald Trump ordered the move. The deployment followed similar moves by the Republican president to mobilize troops against the wishes of local Democratic leadership in Los Angeles as well as Washington, D.C. Trump says the deployments are necessary to crack down on crime and protests against his continuous mass deportation drive. Meanwhile, the suit filed by Oregon and Portland authorities on Sunday accused Trump of overreach of powers. Listen in.
do not need or want federal troops in Oregon, stoking fear, creating conflict, and frankly, escalating a situation that is under control. Any federal takeover with military troops in our state is a threat to communities across Oregon. It violates our right to govern ourselves. It interferes with local law enforcement's ability to fulfill their mission. And frankly, it drains taxpayer resources that could be better spent elsewhere. And again, I communicated that to the president directly. Oregon is our home. It is not a military target. Any deployment would be an abuse of power and a misuse of federal troops.
Staying with the U.S., in yet another case of mass shooting, at least 4 people were killed and several others wounded on Sunday after a shooter targeted a Mormon church in the U.S. state of Michigan. Now, Michigan police said the shooter first rammed the church with his vehicle before opening fire with an assault rifle and then set the building aflame. The attacker was shot dead by the police in the parking lot 8 minutes after the first emergency call came in. US President Donald Trump called the shooting horrendous and said it was yet another targeted attack on Christians in the United States of America. And US inflation continued to pick up in August while consumer spending increased slightly more than expected in the same month, making the Federal Reserve's path on interest rates a little more complicated. Take a look at this report.
U.S. inflation is picking up, according to data out Friday, making the Federal Reserve's path on interest rates a little more complicated. The Personal Consumption Expenditures Price Index, the Fed's preferred inflation gauge, ticked up 0.3% in August, in line with estimates. That put the annual inflation rate at 2.7%, the biggest yearly increase since February. Core inflation, which strips out food and energy, remained stuck at an annual rate of 2.9%. The Fed tracks the PCE index closely as it aims to lower inflation to an annual rate of 2%. Meanwhile, American consumers are still spending, and that's keeping U.S. economic growth on track. The Commerce Department says spending jumped 0.6% in August, beating forecasts. Signs of the economy's resilience were evident in other data this week, showing low layoff numbers and strong demand by businesses for equipment, leading some economists to argue against the need for another interest rate cut this year from the Fed. Still, traders on Friday were pricing in a roughly 88% chance of a rate cut in October, according to CME's FedWatch tool.
U.S. stocks ended higher on Friday after mostly inline U.S. inflation data, but indices posted losses for the week. Now, shares of U.S. drug maker Eli Lilly closed higher as President Donald Trump slapped tariffs on branded pharmaceutical products from other countries. Here's a detailed report.
U.S. stocks ended higher on Friday, with the Dow gaining roughly 0.2%, the S&P 500 climbing about 0.6%, and the Nasdaq adding more than 0.4%. The Personal Consumption Expenditures, or PCE, price index showed inflation ticked up a bit in August, pushing the annual inflation rate to 2.7%, which was in line with expectations. Meanwhile, solid U.S. consumer spending in August underscored the economy's resilience. But Brad Bernstein, managing director at UBS Private Wealth Management, said consumer spending is a story of what he called the haves and have-nots.
50% of consumer spending is coming from just 10% of the population, the top 10% income earners. So as we're starting to see some cracks in auto loans and certain areas in the economy that are representative of the more subprime or maybe creeping in a little bit of the prime lending rate categories, the high income earners, the top 10%, especially the top 1%, make up the vast majority of consumer spending, and that area considers to outperform. And that's what's driving the economy.
Stocks on the move Friday included Electronic Arts, which jumped almost 15% after reports that the company was in advanced talks to go private. Shares of truck maker PACCAR, which makes most of its vehicles for the U.S. market domestically, rose more than 5% a day after President Trump unveiled fresh import tariffs on heavy-duty trucks. Trump also slapped tariffs on branded pharmaceutical products. Shares of U.S. drug maker Eli Lilly closed higher. And 5 out of the Magnificent 7 mega-cap tech stocks closed higher, with Tesla leading the pack with a 4% gain.
Moving on now, Russia launched hundreds of drones and missiles at Kyiv and other parts of Ukraine early on Sunday, killing at least 4 people and injuring dozens in one of the most sustained attacks on the capital of Ukraine since the full-scale conflict began in 2022. In a video address, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said that Russia will have to answer for all it is doing. More details in this next report.
Residents in Kyiv awoke to booming explosions and blaring emergency sirens as Russia launched one of its most sustained attacks on the Ukrainian capital in the war. It killed several people, authorities said, and damaged homes and a hospital. Footage from state emergency services showed firefighters saving people from burning buildings, while residents took shelter in underground metro stations following updates on the attack on their mobile phones. Parts of a cardiology hospital were severely burnt. Kyiv's mayor said it was hit by a drone strike. Some residential areas were left in ruins, with people facing a large-scale cleanup of the debris. Ukraine's military said Russia sent more than 590 drones and nearly 50 missiles across the country overnight, but that its air defenses shot down most of them. The military said the main target of the strike was Kyiv. The attack also prompted neighboring Poland to close its nearby airspace and scramble Air Force jets until the danger had passed. President Volodymyr Zelensky said it lasted more than 12 hours and struck several regions, including the southern city of Zaporizhia. Footage from there showed bloodied civilians and destroyed homes. This 80-year-old woman said she almost suffocated from the smoke after a fire broke out when her building was hit.
It was smoky. I started to go down, and a neighbour from above ran downstairs with a flashlight, so I followed him. If I had not, I would have died there.
Zelensky renewed calls on the international community to cut off Russia's energy revenues that fund its invasion. Ukraine has so far failed to convince US President Donald Trump to hit Moscow with punitive sanctions. On the Telegram messaging app, he said, quote, "The time for decisive action is long overdue, and we count on a strong response from the United States, Europe, the G7 and the G20. Independent monitors said the latest bombardment was one of the biggest Russian attacks on Kyiv and its surrounding region since Moscow launched its full-scale war in 2022. Russia's defense ministry said on Sunday it had carried out a massive strike on Ukraine, hitting military airfields and other facilities. Moscow has denied targeting civilians in its war in Ukraine, although thousands have been killed and residential areas extensively damaged by its attacks.
And finally, from the home stretch after an eventful year for markets to the future of a duty-free trade agreement between the United States and eligible African nations, we leave you with stories to watch in business and finance this week.
From the home stretch for markets to the future of the African Growth and Opportunity Act, these are the stories to watch in business and finance in the coming week. After a remarkable year for markets, traders are entering the last quarter with a semi-warning from Fed Chief Jerome Powell about high stock market valuations. World stocks are now up close to 17% in 2025, although gold and Chinese tech remain the biggest winners, both adding almost 40%. A series of key events are still to come before year-end. The Fed is expected to move again. China holds its plenum gathering of top party leaders, and US President Donald Trump and China's President Xi Jinping are expected to get together at some point. There are also IMF World Bank meetings and a UN climate summit to look forward to. US jobs data is due October 3rd. The numbers are one piece of key data ahead of the Fed meeting at the end of October. Expectations are high for another rate cut, but a hot jobs number could scuttle that, if the data is released at all. The US federal government could be heading for a partial shutdown, raising concerns the data will not be announced as scheduled. Early October could be pivotal for the path of Bank of Japan policy, with the Tankan survey of corporate sentiment out Wednesday. The closely watched economic indicator has garnered additional attention after a policy board member called September's edition extremely important in a speech last month. Markets are already pondering the odds of an October hike after September's hawkish pivot. A duty-free trade agreement between the United States and eligible African nations is set to lapse on Tuesday. The African Growth and Opportunity Act, or AGOA, offers more than 30 African economies a key market for their exports. Lobbying efforts have not elicited any formal commitments from U.S. officials, compounding the situation for a region that is already reeling from Trump's imposition of trade tariffs.
मुझसे नहीं हो गया। उनको देख रहे हो?
क्या संगीत तक ये स्टेप सीख पाएंगे? ये खूबसूरत चिंता आप करिए। शादी के पर्सनल लोन की चिंता हम संभाल लेंगे। With EMI starting at 94 rupees per day and tenure up to 7 years.
Dreaming about me.
Love is to get lost in the look. Unlimit Love. B6 Pack 2 starts at 21.9 lakh. Mahindra Electric Origin SUVs.
Breaking news. Major disruption is expected this week.
Yes, disruption confirmed. That's me. Relax. No scams. Just my